Hey everybody, Tim here, coming at you live again. Had a technical glitch. I think I fixed it, so we'll find out. That's why these live videos can kind of be tough sometimes. So, today's episode of Star Trek, it will be Deep Space Nine, Season 4, Episode 1, The Way of the Warrior. To me, this is a great episode. It was the turning point of the series because, like, to be honest with you, between seasons 1, 2, and 3, I felt like season 3 was kind of the lowest of the season. There were some good episodes in there, but it's very story arc, and it was a little bit slow for me. I just didn't really dig it. So, I mentioned it a minute ago. I'll mention it again because I don't know how many people saw it. So you can tell that this episode for the season really started to change the way the direction they wanted to go in. Just from the opening credits alone, this is like the second time they've really completely redone the opening credits, where now there's like ships all over Deep Space Nine, because seasons 1, 2, and 3, it was just glory shots of the station, and they wanted to show how there is stuff going on in the station, and so they added all sorts of ships and movement and stuff like that, and it is pretty interesting. The second big change that they made was Sisko, just in general. So Sisko, Avery Brooks, before this show came out, was really well known for playing the character Hawk in Spencer and his own show Hawk, where he was bald and had a goatee. And they talked about this a lot in the documentary What We Left Behind. So if you guys haven't seen that, I highly recommend it. Where their exact words were, he couldn't look like that in this because he would look too street. And Avery Brooks has said over and over again that he feels the most comfortable as a person bald and with a goatee. And so finally, after being in the show for 3 seasons, they let him grow out the goatee in the last couple of episodes of season 3. And then finally, starting in this one, he was able to shave his head. And right away, like when Cassidy comes in, she comments on how nice he looks. And so I props to Avery Brooks for he wanted it and he fought for it and he finally got it. Kind of in contrast to that, like LeVar Burton in The Next Generation had always wanted a beard, and like even now he has a beard after the show's ended, but they would never let him do it. He only has a beard in like 3 episodes, and 2 of those episodes are because he was getting married and he like demanded they let him have a beard for his own wedding, and so they just kind of wrote it into the show. I gotta have a drink. Okay, so I'll go ahead and just start my notes going down. And if you guys pop up, because, I mean, I do these videos a little bit earlier now, because it's awesome to have you guys pop up. So the episode starts out pretty interesting. My nerd card? I'm curious what you mean by that. So the episode starts with the crew doing battle drills with Odo. And which is interesting because in the last episode they had talked about how the changeling that was on board the Defiant had mentioned like it's too late and they're everywhere. And so now for this episode we can tell that they have started doing drills to kind of practice for when the Dominion starts invading or if there is a changeling on board. My dog says hello. We see Cassidy Yates return, played by, I didn't write it down, Penny Jason Jarrett, whatever. She's a great actress. She's in Orville now. So we see her return, and I like how they kept her around, but she's not like a permanent character as of right now. She kind of keeps going back and forth because she's a captain in her own right, which is very important in, I think, the second part of this episode. So the oh shit moment for this episode is where we see at least 20 Klingon ships decloak all around the station. And I mean, you can kind of tell with the title that it's going to be a Klingon episode with The Way of the Warrior. And to be honest with you, like this was what, 1996 or something? I'm sure they had talked about Worf joining the show before this episode came out, but I didn't really pay attention to Deep Space Nine, so I don't really remember. So if you guys are old enough to remember when like DS9 premiered and when this episode came out, do you remember how big of a moment it was when they announced that Worf was joining the show? Or was it just kind of a surprise afterwards? I'd be interested to see what you guys have to say about that. Probably one of my favorite moments of this episode is Odo and Garrick eating breakfast or whatever together, which is something that they had talked about in the two-part episode when like Garrick basically kidnaps and tortures Odo. But it's a great scene overall because Odo talks about how he has like trained his body enough that he can produce food that he's holding and it makes it look like he's eating it. So he has like a cup of coffee and the cup and the coffee inside of it is all him. It's just an extension of his hand. And he takes a drink of it, and so now there's less coffee, and then he like fills it up. And I mean, it's a really simple effect. They just had a hose in the cup, but it's a really nice effect. I really liked how they did that. And it's just kind of interesting how he's doing it to kind of play along, and it shows how like conniving the changelings can be. Kind of like in that last episode where the changeling of Bashir like does a blood sample and is able to kind of like switch it and then produce his own all like in a second, and nobody notices, and then they think the security guard was the changeling. So the changelings are definitely like, the way they're developing them is great to watch, just to see like how smart they really are and how they're not your typical villain like the Klingons or the Romulans or even the Borg. How they are like their own category of evil. Which, I mean, to them, they're not evil, but the best villains always think that they're the heroes. So you guys are kind of quiet today. So from here, Worf finally joins the show, and I was actually going to wear my gear today, but I didn't. I actually just got out of the shower, so whatever. And there's some interesting dialogue between Worf and Sisko. So this would technically be at least the second time Worf has been on the station, because he was on the station in Birthright Part 1 and 2, the two-parter of The Next Generation. So we saw him there. So he's talking to Sisko, who is now Captain Sisko, so he outranks Worf. And he mentions the destruction... Oh, there's my dog, Little Bear. He mentions the destruction of the Enterprise. So I mentioned it when I got to that episode where this episode is officially after Generations, but he offers his condolences. So it's now part of like the series that the Enterprise D is no longer. But they do mention building another one. What are you doing back there? So I like that. I thought it was kind of interesting. And to kind of go back to the documentary, it was kind of interesting where they do touch upon Worf joining the series, and a lot of people were really upset. Like, I don't know how much of it was them actually upset and how much of it was them, like, playing for the documentary, but, like, Armin Shimmerman was upset, and Avery Brooks was upset, and they were just kind of going through, like, fuck that, we don't need the Next Generation to, like, boost our ratings. And, like, the only person that was really okay with it was, like, Colomini, the Chief O'Brien, who was like, it was great to see him again. So I thought that was kind of interesting, how people really kind of, like, attacked Worf because they felt like it was the Next Generation being like, oh, you need us to save you. And it wasn't. It really wasn't. But it was kind of an interesting addition to the cast. What are you doing back there, huh? And on top of that, Michael Dorn has come aboard and said, like, in the documentary, he said, like, some of his favorite episodes were actually Deep Space Nine because they were very different episodes than what you would expect from the Next Generation. So I thought that was really cool. And I liked how many connections they had to the Next Generation in this episode, where they were like, yeah, Worf is now going to be here, but he does still have a past that you need to see. So, for example, he goes up to Quark, and Quark's like, let me guess, blood wine. And he's like, prune juice, chilled. And it's a funny joke. It goes back to Guinan's bar. And then when he goes to his room, he has a picture of Alexander there. So they're clearly acknowledging he does have a family. And he even talks about how Alexander is living with his parents on Earth, his adopted parents. So that was kind of cool. This is also the episode where the famous line, "You must think me a fool to make your lies so transparent," comes from, which my mod bro Joshua, that's like one of his favorite lines. Like, he quotes it all the time. So we find out through the course of the episode that basically the Klingons think that Cardassia has been taken over by the changelings, and so that they're going to Cardassia to basically take control of it, to take control over the planet to see what's going on. And Cisco's like, no, that's not going to happen. And all sorts of stuff have been going on where, like, Cassidy's ship tries to leave, and the Klingons pick the wrong ship to fuck with, and they, like, get a tractor beam on it, and they're like, no, we're checking every ship that leaves the wormhole or leaves Bajorin space. And Cisco is like, no. And he takes the Defiant and, like, does a shot over their bow, like a warning shot. And, like, the Klingons are like, Gowron will hear about this. And, like, it's like, out of all the ships you guys had to pick to do with, they had to choose Cisco's girlfriend. Like, it was a bad mistake. So anyways, by the end of the first part, roughly, the treaty between Klingons and the Federation has now ended. So we're not necessarily at war with the Klingons, but that the Khitomer Accord treaties are now done, because they cite all these regulations, like Klingons can't just come into Bajoran space and do whatever they want. And so there you go. Oh, that's strong. So Gowron actually appears, which this is now his second time on Deep Space Nine. The first was the House of Quark. And I don't know, I really like Gowron. And to go back to the Next Generation, where we see Gowron actually, like, rise to power, to go from there to this one, like, I don't know, he seems like a completely different character. Like, I don't know, maybe, I'm sure being, like, the High Chancellor or whatever his title is very different and very stressful, but I don't know, he seemed different. Like, the whole time, like, when he talks to Worf, I was expecting him to be a changeling, and who knows, maybe he is, I just don't remember. But I don't know, I feel like the writers never really knew what to do with Gowron. They were just like, I don't know, he has really big eyes, so just always have him staring at people. They mention a lot of good scenes between Worf and Chief O'Brien, which is what I loved. I had actually hoped that we would see more scenes like that, like going back to the episode I just mentioned, Birthright, the two-part Next Generation crossover, where we see Dr. Bashir in the Next Generation. I had kept hoping that Chief O'Brien was going to be in that two-part episode. They mention him, but we never see him. Whereas this is that episode where I kept hoping that they would have conversations, and you basically just see Worf and O'Brien talking about, like, hey, do you remember when we saved Picard from the Borg? Oh yeah, that was great. And hey, you know how you used to like to play poker? Well, try darts. And it's a fun scene. I really, really enjoyed it. From here, like, to be honest with you, like, it kept, sometimes two-parters are a little bit much for me. This is kind of like the basic rest of the story, where the Klingons do try to invade Cardassia. Gul Dukat has to ask for help. So to watch the Defiant really come into glory and save Gul Dukat, I have heartburn already, I'm sorry. Save Gul Dukat, like, battle a bunch of Klingon ships and get back to DS9. And then this is the badass part about this whole episode, where you see the station, and everybody always talks about how, like, oh, Deep Space Nine is boring because it's just a station, it doesn't do anything. We need, like, a ship with shields and photon torpedoes that can maneuver. This is that scene where it's like, no, you guys are wrong. Because DS9 raises their shields, and, like, you have, I think they said, like, 24 or 36 Klingon battle cruisers around them. And, like, Deep Space Nine, not even moving, is just annihilating all of these ships and just going to town, blowing them up, firing the odd number torpedoes, firing the even number torpedoes. And it's really interesting to watch Deep Space Nine do the best they can against all of these different ships, because they say, well, the Federation's coming for backup, but they're not going to be here for quite a while. And so it's a really well done scene that shows how badass the station can really be. So I really enjoyed that. I thought it was, like, after 3 seasons of build-up, we finally get to see it. I really enjoyed it. And they talked about, so throughout this whole episode, they talk about how the best way to deal with a Klingon is with another Klingon. And that's part of the reason why they have Worf come on board. And Worf is like, you know what, my ship just crashed, and I'm ready to retire. But they, of course, like, it was pretty obvious from the moment he stepped on board, that they were going to talk him into it. And they talk Worf into staying, and that's the ending shot of this, is Worf is now the strategic operations officer, and they give him a red uniform, which is kind of funny because O'Brien's like, you look good in red, and Worf's like, it feels good. Well, I mean, technically it feels good to be back in red because all of the first season he was also in red. Like, do you remember that? You watched it. But now we get to see Worf in his own little Deep Space Nine shoulder outfit, and I mean, that's basically the end, is they get to it, and he's now part of the crew. Oh, I'm dying today. Jamie says Gowron isn't a changeling, which I couldn't remember. I mean, at this point, I just kind of assume everybody is. But how badass would it have been if it turns out that they were, and that's why they were going after the Cardassians? And Jamie also says he loved the battle scenes, because it's a great scene, isn't it? Because, I don't know, do we see more battle scenes of Deep Space Nine where the station does the attacking? I don't remember. Like, I've seen Deep Space Nine, so if you guys are ever like, oh, I don't want to spoil it for you, I've seen it already, I just don't remember it, because it's been 9 years since I watched Deep Space Nine. And so, like, a lot of this is just kind of refresher for me, and to do reviews with you guys, if you guys like them. Which, quick little segue, for those who have been watching my Doctor Who reviews, thank you guys for commenting on that. Thank you guys, for those who have been watching my Golden Girls reviews, thank you guys for commenting on those. My husband, like, to be honest, he's not digging it. He doesn't like doing the reviews, but he's doing it because I tell him to. So, any words of encouragement on the Golden Girls reviews would go a long way for him. So thank you guys for watching those reviews and this one. I got tons of reviews going on all at the same time now. So, as far as DS9, going into the 4th season, what are you guys the most excited for? What are you guys the least excited for? What did you guys think about this episode with the Klingons basically saying, like, you guys can't control your own borders, we'll do it for you? Sorry, I'm reading your notes. Because, I don't know, like, if people watch this on YouTube and then I just get really quiet, it's because I'm reading the notes that don't pop up. Jamie says, we do see the station attack when Dominions attack with the Cardassians. Okay, so I clearly don't remember that. And then Kyle says, DS9 is the only series that makes mention of uniform color. I think you're right. I'm not going to say no, but I can't really remember anything else specifically making mention of it. So that's kind of interesting that they don't. Now, you know what? Starting tomorrow, I'm going to have to, like, rewatch the entire series again to see. He says, I don't know about the original series, though. I never watched it. Okay, so first of all, Kyle, that's your homework assignment. Go watch the original series. And also, the original series wasn't super specific about color. For example, like, Kirk was command, so he wore gold. But then, like, throughout most of the 3rd series, he wore, like, a green tunic. It was really weird. But I think you're right. I don't remember them actually talking about color a whole lot. So that's kind of interesting. I like random trivia, so I appreciate that. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off unless you guys have any last minute comments. So what did you guys think about this as a series premiere? I mentioned it in my last video that DS9 never, or I won't say never, doesn't really do the cliffhanger episodes where it ends the season on 1 and it starts the season on part 2. It always kind of went to the end, had a big bang at the end, and then the premiere is always a 2-parter, which I consider this one episode, just to let you guys know, because it aired on the same day. So what do you guys think going into season 4? We're almost halfway through the series at this point. So go ahead, let me know what you guys think about it. Go ahead and keep going with your comments. I will always respond. And then, gotta scroll down. My notes are like everywhere. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for subscribing. Thank you guys for doing everything. I will see you guys next time for The Visitor.